So you've got your perfect arrows that you've built through spine matching. You know that they are mathematically perfect for your bow. You got your bow as close to perfect as you can at this point. The next thing you have to do is paper tune. I'm a big believer in paper tuning over bare shaft tuning for a couple of reasons. The biggest being arrows perform differently with vanes on them, and I don't care what my arrow does with bare shafts because I'm never going to shoot an arrow without vanes on it. So I do all my shooting tuning using a fletched arrow. And I have a really thorough video on how I do that with no fancy equipment. I just use a cardboard box and a staircase to get the right level. And it's a really thorough explanation of how I paper tune at home. And once you do that, you're good to go. If you do know how to do it, go ahead and skip to the last video where I'm going to show you just a few last little checks that I do on my bow to make sure it's perfect and good to go, and then we're almost done. Today we're paper tuning. I'm going to talk about what paper tuning is, why it's important, and then lastly we're going to go over how you can paper tune at home without any special or fancy equipment. You don't need those paper tuning racks with the big rolls of paper. Those are great, but you don't need it. You can absolutely paper tune at home with nothing more than a set of stairs and a cardboard box. So let's get into it. So first of all, we'll talk about what is paper tuning and why it's important. Paper tuning is the process of shooting your bow at very close range, like 3 to 5 yards, through a piece of paper and then reading what the hole in that paper looks like. What we're looking for is we're trying to see where the front of the arrow makes contact with the paper and how the back of the arrow follows. So what'll happen is you'll shoot through a piece of paper and it generally won't be perfect right off the bat. You'll either have a left tear, a right tear, an up tear, a down tear, or any combination. Let's say you have a left tear. That means that the tail of your arrow is following the front of your arrow to the left. It means that the front of your arrow is not perfectly following the back of your arrow in flight. This is an exaggerated version, but it means your arrow is flying through the air like this. Or an up and down tear would mean your arrow is flying like this or like this. Of course, that's highly exaggerated, but essentially what we're trying to do is get the front of your arrow perfectly in line with the back of your arrow through its entire course of flight. The reason this is important just comes down to aerodynamics. If an arrow is flying like perfectly straight through the air, there's not a lot of resistance. There's nothing that can steer the arrow except for the vanes. They're the biggest piece of resistance on an arrow that is flying properly. And it really becomes important when you start shooting fixed blade broadheads. And that's why we stress paper tuning so much. If you have a paper tuned bow and a properly built arrow, you should be able to stick any or most fixed blade broadheads on the front of your arrow and it will have no issues in flight. But when you don't paper tune and you try to shoot a fixed blade broadhead, that's when you typically will start to see issues in that flight with the broadheads. All of a sudden your broadheads aren't grouping with your field points. And the reason for that is if your arrow is flying through the air like this, your vanes are trying to stabilize the arrow back here. But up here, your broadhead, essentially it's kind of like the vanes. It's going to try to steer the arrow from the front end too, and they're fighting each other. They don't work. You want nothing to be steering from the front end except the weight guiding your arrow to its point and letting the back end, letting the vanes do its job steering the arrow. So that's exactly what we're going to do with paper tuning. We're going to make sure this arrow is flying perfectly straight, and the end result will be that I can go out to the range and shoot my field points, sight in my bow with my field points, and then put on my broadheads, and there should be little to no, generally no deviation between the two. It's very rare that after I go through the full process of paper tuning that I have to do any adjustments. Typically, I'll expect to go out, sight in my bow with field points, and then stick on broadheads, and they're bang on. So let's get into it. So I want to talk about how you should have your bow set up before you go into paper tuning, and then once you start paper tuning, what adjustments you're going to make to get your bow properly tuned. So what I always do to start with is I get my bow in the vise and I install my arrow rest in such a way that my arrow is perfectly in what's called center shot, which is the dead center line of your bow. You can find that using the tiller bolts. That is always the true center of the bow. So that'll be your left and right, and then I make the arrow perfectly level. I'll make it in line with the burger button holes. The burger button holes are those are the holes that you're going to mount your arrow rest into. That's a bit more of an old school name for them, but I will line up my arrow perfectly level and in line with the burger button hole. So now you have it leveled and perfectly left and right. And generally this alone with a properly spine match arrow, I shoot through paper, and I would say 3 out of 5 times I have to make 0 adjustments. The other 2, it's 1 small adjustment and we're done. So that would be how I want you to set your bow up before you start paper tuning, and it's going to make it really easy to paper tune once you've done that. Now let's say you shoot through paper, you get an up-down tear. Well, an up-down tear is the easiest to fix. You're simply going to move your arrow rest up or down to compensate. So that's the process in a nutshell. You're going to shoot through paper. You're going to have probably some combination of a vertical and a horizontal tear. Fix one at a time. Get the vertical sorted out first, and then try solving the horizontal after. You can do the entire thing with arrow rest adjustments. Now, the reason I say to do your vertical first is because if you have a bow that has split yokes, then I want you to never move your arrow rest left or right in the process of paper tuning. This is why I have such a preference of split yokes in a bow when I'm selecting a new bow, and I probably won't get a new bow for a lot of years just because this one checks all the boxes for me. The biggest thing I love about this bow is it has, you can see these both cables end in a split or a Y. Those are called split yoke cables, and what those allow me to do is once my arrow rest is perfectly dead center, I might still shoot through paper and have a left or right tear. Now, it is easy to move the arrow rest left or right to compensate, but if my arrow rest is dead center, then I know that's not the issue. What's happening is that my string is not dead center, and by having these yokes, I can add or remove twists from one side or the other of a yoke and literally move my string left or right. So the way I look at it is, if I know my arrow rest is dead center and I shoot through paper and there's still a left or right tear, well, I could move my arrow rest to fix it, but to me, it doesn't feel good because I know that my string will be one way and I'm overcompensating with my arrow rest to fix the problem, but it seems like a band-aid solution to me. I want everything to be perfectly in line. So that's why I opt for a bow with split yokes, because it gives me the ability to know that my string is dead center and my arrow rest is dead center, and the paper tuning proves it. Now, not all bows have split yokes, and if you don't, that's totally fine. Your bow is designed to work very well the way it's built, so don't worry about it. Just fix your left and right tears using the arrow rest, moving it left or right. But regardless of what you do, I would say fix your up and down tears first, just by moving the arrow rest up and down, and then worry about your horizontal tear. If you have yokes, do it that way. If you don't have yokes, just do it with the arrow rest. So if you do choose to take the yoke tuning way, if you have the ability, if you have a bow that has split yokes, a right tail on your paper is going to be solved by adding twists to the right yokes. And I would add, depending on how big the tear is, 1 full twist at a time. When that tear starts getting very small, you can do a half a twist at a time, but it doesn't take much to fix it. And that's the same even with your arrow rest adjustments. Very, very small adjustments will go a long ways. So if you have a right tail, you're going to add twists to your right yokes, and that's going to move your string the correct way. If you have a left tail, you're going to add twists to your left yoke. Now, if you feel like you've added too many twists to one side, and that does happen, you can tell it just starts to look a little over twisted, the same thing can be accomplished by removing twists from the other side. So if you have a right tail, you can add twists to the right side or remove twists from the left side, and it'll do the same thing. Just whatever you do, make sure you do it to the top and bottom, because this will affect your cam timing. By twisting the yokes, you are impacting the length of the cable, so as long as you do the same thing on either one, your cam timing shouldn't be affected. So now I'll show you how you can actually make a paper tuner at home. If you ever go to a bow shop, they have like those big rolls of paper on a stand, and that works really good. It's really nice if you have that, but if you don't want to spend the money, you don't have to buy one of those. I never actually have. I've done this for a lot of years and it always works just fine. So what I do is I just take a cardboard box that has a face about the size of a piece of paper. This is actual paper tuning paper. It tells me my left, right tears or whatever. I actually typically just shoot through the back of it because gets kind of annoying to me. But all you're gonna do is I take a box that's about the size of your sheet of paper. You can use any printer paper or go to the dollar store and get some construction paper, just kind of a stiffer paper than like a notebook paper is what you want. And what I'll do is I just did it before filming here. You cut out a square right around the edges and pop that out. And then I'll take these inside pieces and just fold them back. And then I'll just go in and do a bunch of taping to make the box a bit sturdy. This is just packing tape. So I've just used some tape to sturdy up the box a bit, make sure that there's no flaps that are gonna come loose or anything, and that's pretty darn good. So now what I'll do is I'll just take my paper and I will tape it. You want it to be pretty tight, and I'll just tape it. You don't even need to tape it on all four sides, just so long as it won't move when you make impact with it. And there you have it. It's not fancy, it's not special, but you have a perfectly fine paper tuner here. This will absolutely work. This is all I've done for a lot of years. I'll generally keep a box for a season and then get rid of it and make a new one the next season, but this works perfectly fine. You can just cut off the paper or rip it off and start fresh with a new one anytime you want. So now we'll actually get to the paper tuning. So this is my setup here. It's certainly nothing fancy. I just have a really big target in the back. I put my paper tuning box right in front. You want to make sure that there's enough distance between the target and the inside of the box that your arrow can actually completely pass through the box and stick into the target, and you'll get a clean read like that. So this is it. I do this at the top of a set of stairs. I'm very lucky to have a set of stairs in my garage that I could do this on, but you can do this in the house when your wife is gone. The other way you can do this is just on your kitchen table or your kitchen counter. You can elevate your target and the box, and again, probably when your wife is gone, but you can certainly do it that way too if you don't have access to a set of stairs like this. I like the set of stairs because I can go down 4 or 5 steps and get my perfect height and get it to where I'm shooting, and it feels very natural, like I'm not crouching or trying to stand tall to get that height to get that proper height for me to shoot through the target. The stairs are really good for that, so that would be my preference. Let's do it. So when you're doing this, there's a few things to keep in mind. I always like to shoot 3 arrows before making any adjustments. If you shoot 3 arrows and you have a consistent tear across 3, then it's good. Go ahead and make your adjustments. If you aren't getting a consistent tear, then that could be one of 2 things. Either your hand position and your form is off. That is huge for paper tuning. A little change in your hand position will completely change the way your tear looks, so I really want you to focus on what your hand position looks like when you're doing this. Proper shooting form is critical. The other reason you might not be getting consistent tears is if your arrows are not properly spine matched. Then that will make it so you can essentially never properly paper tune your bow. So spine matching is hugely important, and you can check out our video series on that as well. So I'm going to take a few shots here. I've got myself about 7 stairs down. I'm at the right height that this is going to be really comfortable for me to shoot right through that box. So here's what my tears look like. This was my first shot, my second, my third. They're all quite consistent, and they're not bad. They're pretty darn close to being perfect. So this one's a little bit hard to read. So I'm gonna focus on these 2 because they all, I can tell, are very consistent with the way they tore the paper. And this one particularly is the easiest to read. What I'm seeing here and here, This kind of bigger center circle portion, that's the front of your arrow, and then the cross is the center of the cross is obviously where your veins went through. So this one looks a little better than this one. That's I guarantee just a lapse in my form. But regardless, what I'm seeing is a little bit of tail left, and I'm seeing a little bit of tail high. So I'm going to start by fixing the tail high. I'm just going to adjust my arrow rest, and then I'm going to do probably with that amount of tail left, it's very little. I'm going to start with just a half twist on each left yoke. Left tear means add twist to your left yoke. So that's what I'm going to do. So I always like to keep this on hand. This is an old paper tuning chart I have. It tells me which way I need to move my arrow rest or my nocking point in order to fix the tear. So I had tail high, meaning that my arrow is flying through the air with the tail above the point of the arrow. So what I need to do is either lower my string nocking point or raise my arrow rest. It's a huge pain to lower my nocking point, and I don't think it makes much of a difference as long as you're very close to that level area around those burger buttonholes, which I am. This is such a small adjustment, so I'm going to raise my arrow rest. Now I have one of these Vapor Trail arrow rests with the micro adjust, and I really like the micro adjust. For when it comes to paper tuning, it's just so handy. So I'm going to raise my arrow rest just a little bit. And when I mean a little bit, I mean literally a 64th of an inch is all you need to do. I also had a slightly left tail. Now it was very minor, but I'm gonna try to take care of it right now. So what I'm gonna do is, because I have the split yokes and I have a bow press, I'm going to do the yoke tuning method. If you don't have split yokes, you'll just do the arrow rest method, and left tail would mean you move your arrow rest to the right to correct. So that's what I would be doing now. If I didn't have yokes, I'd move my arrow rest just a hair to the right to correct it. But I know that my arrow rest is center shot because I did it before when I set up this bow. I know that it's my yokes that need to be adjusted. So I'm just going to very carefully press my bow here until I get enough slack on my yokes. I had a left tail, so I'm going to add a half a twist to each left yoke. Actually, I think I've changed my mind and I'm going to add a full twist. You can always go back. Okay, there's a full twist added. And if you are doing this with a bow press, whenever you are releasing your bow press, always pull up on your string so that there's tension. Always check all of your string and cable tracks and the loops to make sure they're on their posts, just for safety. And there we go. Let's go shoot it through paper again. So here's what we're looking at after my second set of shots. This was my first, my second, and my third. My first one looks really good. I can see that it's just still a touch tail left, but the up and down is perfect, and you can see that tail left definitely came in. A lot of guys would call this good enough. I think we can take it one step further. This was my second shot. It's a little more clear that the tail is just slightly left, but again, the up and down is perfect. This was my last shot. To me, this is perfect. So what I would do in this case, because I want the best accuracy I can possibly get, is I'm going to add one more twist to each of my left yokes, not do anything on the arrow rest up or down, and I'm going to shoot through paper again just to see if I can get 3 holes that look like this. Most guys would call this good enough. If you do, I don't hold it against you at all. You're gonna have great broadhead flight if this is what your tears look like. I'm gonna take that one extra step, but there's no need to waste your guys' time showing that on video. I'm just gonna do the exact same thing I did again. I'm just gonna do essentially half the adjustment on the yokes because it does not need to move very much. Well, there you guys have it. That's paper tuning. It's quite a straightforward process. I remember when I started doing it, I would spend literally hours shooting my bow and going through 10 sheets of paper, and I just couldn't figure it out. I think a lot of it came down to my hand position. I think a lot of it came down to me overcorrecting when I was moving my rest or my yokes. So just take things slow, take things logically. Sometimes it does get a little confusing. You know, I have this tear, what do I have to do? What does this mean? You might think back to something you did to your bow early and it's set up that gets you overthinking. Just don't overthink it. The paper doesn't lie. Make consistent shots, keep your hand position really stable, and have fun with it. This is a really cool, really fun process, and I guarantee if you do a good job on this, you're gonna have a lot of fun at the range when you stick your broadheads on and they fly with your field points. Thanks a lot for watching. If you guys have any questions, comments, or suggestions for future videos, please let us know. Thanks.